My musical cues are just so off, Charles. I've got so many things to think about here.
We need to get a sound person.
That's right. And this is a special Tuesday edition. You're closing in. I mean, I feel it happening with each day. It's a long process to close in on the largest criminal syndicate, the most powerful, pervasive, organized crime scandal in the history of humankind. We can't simply expect closure to happen like that.
Right, exactly.
So thank you for carrying on with the closing in. It was a most impressive performance, I felt, by President Trump just the other day at the Presidential Summit with Vladimir Putin, but he's just been lambasted in the mainstream media by dopes. And I felt it was so important that we get on this right away. I didn't even want to wait until Wednesday, and I'm thankful that you had the time to join me today.
This is my great pleasure. I mean, I think that what we're witnessing here is a very unusual moment in history. It could end up, I hope it won't be like the time that John F. Kennedy was shot, but you know, a moment such as that, where everyone remembers who was alive at that point, you know, where they were and, you know, and what it meant. But former President Ike Eisenhower, you know, in his departing speech, his farewell to the nation, he warned against the evils of the great, industrial, what did he call it? The
military-industrial complex.
Industrial complex. And here's a former general who knew from where he spoke. And for those of us who are not that familiar with facts, it would really behoove you to go and look at the National Income and Products accounts, which show just how large military spending was back in 1960, in the 50s, and certainly after we got involved with World War II. I mean, the scale of our defense spending relative to the scale of social spending and other spending in government was monumental. I mean, it's even though it's big now, relative to other aspects of spending, military spending is puny compared to what it was.
Really?
Absolutely, in terms of as a relationship to the social spending, not in terms of dollars.
Guns and butter, Charles.
I mean, there was no butter. There wasn't even margarine back then. I mean, there wasn't
Butter
even
up
salt. You know, it was just like guns, and then more guns, and then big ships, and lots of planes, and whatever. So he warned wisely in his farewell address, which is worth these farewell addresses of most presidents. You know, there's certain presidents I wouldn't really care too much for their parting words. And we'll be bipartisan here. Like, I don't care what George W. had to say on his way out the door. It was like, could you leave a little sooner? Or, frankly, what Barack Obama had to say in his departure.
Concerned about the door hitting him on the ass.
Yeah, just get that, you know. But so Ike warned about the dangers of this military-industrial complex, and it's resilient, it's big. And with the advent of great improvements in technology that indeed make your show possible here, your shows, I should say, your media empire possible, you know, with a very light staff, let's just say, and you know, what you see is that the people who profit from perpetual war need to have enemies. They need to have, they need to animate the American population to believe that we're a grave existential threat. That's why we need to spend all this money. That's why we need to have all these Solons around explaining to us what great work they're doing.
What's a Solon?
A wise man or woman, wise man actually technically, but we'll say wise person. You know, going around saying, you know, Jason, you don't really understand all the great work we do for you 24/7, because, you know, when we stop plots, we don't talk about them. And we've stopped all these plots and all these dangers, and you're so safe, and you should just continue to let us launder money around the world and meddle in elections around the world and do whatever we want and just pay for it, because you know, that's the way it works. You should just let us, you know, make all kinds of money and fly around the world and, you know, collect all these awards and honorary and Nobel Peace Prizes, because again, that's the way it works for we the entitled and noble people, not you schmucks who pay for it.
Right.
You know? So I think in that environment, people who in the mainstream media, or what remains of the mainstream media that isn't lame, you know, they look at all this, and globalism, unregulated globalism, that's, you know, there's a lot of soup for that, right? You know, they love that kind of stuff.
Right.
I mean, it lets these media companies go all over the world, and young journalists fly all over the world and write stories from all over the world, and, you know, think they're important, et cetera.
Have sex with the subjects of their articles.
Exactly, on a regular basis, and then
that's only the New York Times, I think.
No, I think that's many of the distinguished portions of the media. Same thing in academia. You know, globalism, that's great. You know, you have 10 times as many applicants for the same number of spaces. You have the ability to have all these rich donors give you lots of money as a professor one way or another, and you go off and do your deals. A state of perpetual war where we have these great, big, gigantic defense contractors. You know, how expensive is it to buy off all these Congress people and senators? It's not expensive.
It's been done.
It's chump change, you know. So you got that. And people in America are not curious enough. I mean, that's why this crowdsource the truth thing is such a great idea, and why I'm happy to come on it. Because you're making a difference, and I think the crowdsourcers are making a difference, getting engaged on the facts, holding these people to account. And what the mainstream jerks don't want to understand, what Hillary Clinton will never understand because she's that dumb, is that she lost the election because Americans in both parties, especially working class Democrats, most independents, conservative Republicans, are sick, to take a phrase out of her book, sick and tired of her and of this whole idea that, you know, we should just let, you know, bright bulbs in Washington run the globalist economy with no controls. That was over in 2016. That's what Donald Trump's victory is all about.
Well, it's not just the economy. Obviously, based on what we're seeing yesterday and today, they want to run the diplomacy as well. I mean, I saw people suggesting that Donald Trump should have gone in there and said, it was Scaramucci said that he should have gone in there and told Putin, you better admit to meddling in the election or I'm never going to talk to you again.
Look,
what kind of diplomacy is that?
And Anthony Scaramucci has absolutely no experience, you know, in this kind. I'm not saying, you know,
what is his background?
He's made a lot of money as an asset manager. He went to Harvard Law School. He went to Goldman Sachs, and he set up a small investment management firm. Then he created a very big one.
Well, he can't be an idiot doing all that.
Right, but he's just, you know, he's very popular with certain portions of the Fox crowd, and it's very easy to sit there and talk about what you would do.
Right.
You know, it's yet another thing to say, all right, Mooch, you know, get on a plane. You handle the worldwide press conference. And by the way, how well did you do in your tenure managing things in the White House on the communications? Did you last a whole week? No, you didn't. You last less than a week. So
remind me why they kicked him out so quickly?
I forget exactly the many different things that he screwed up in a short period of time. But I mean, so the point is, when you take a big step back and you look at realities, certain realities that even, you know, Jake Tapper eventually will figure out when he's 120. The United States and Russia do control what we know about 90% of the world's nuclear weapons, right?
What, was it nuclear weapons or nuclear energy or
weapons,
both?
Weapons. Russia actually has a bigger share, I think, of nuclear energy than we do. Okay, and that gets back into the whole uranium one and all that kind of stuff. But, you know, Russia has made a very big business of putting up nuclear plants for energy in parts of the world where we don't venture. And they have had a lot of experience in that. And of course, we have all these Greenpeacers and, you know, sustainable energy people who don't want nuclear power in the United States. So,
well, we had, you know,
3 Mile Island. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking about Chernobyl.
Well, that was in Russia.
That's what I mean.
Actually, it's Ukraine, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Close, yeah. Anyway, so getting back a little bit into thinking about the importance of this summit, we've had a team in the never-Trumper Republicans, in Hillary Clinton, and the crony capitalists behind Hillary Clinton who've been milking the former Soviet Union, milking different states in Central Europe and other failed states around the world, destabilizing them, a la George Soros, and there's several other firms that specialize in actually providing arms to rebels and destabilizing a country and then getting contracts back. I mean, it's just diabolical capitalism. And you know, we most Americans, you know, you're sitting there and you say, hey, Jason, you know, you're 18 years old, let's say, and you're thinking about getting a job. Want to go work for an investment fund where we arm rebels and destabilize African countries for profit?
There are people who would want to do that.
But most Americans would say, you know, what are you? Yeah, get off that crack habit because it's going to kill you sooner or later. I mean, that is irresponsible. Yeah. That is something. If we're going to have, you know, regulators talk about, you know, regulating capital markets, we shouldn't be directing institutional funds in size to firms that are destabilizing the global economy for fun and profit. Right?
Well, that's why I asked you about KK&R. I mean, I don't know that much about this kind of stuff, but I went to a speech where someone who I understand to be a principal at that firm, or at least a very important guy, and I'm talking about David Petraeus, gave a whole public presentation about how we need to attack China. And I was thinking to myself, is this guy crazy?
Well, so I think KKR is actually one of the real early institutional funds specializing in the old-fashioned deals where they started out specializing in what are called leveraged buyouts. And that's where you take a company that hasn't borrowed that much money and that is managed, let's say, not as efficiently as it should. This is when they started.
Right.
And you basically use the untapped collateral of the target company and you change its capital structure. You borrow money on the credit of the target, and you adopt a very different capital structure that the previous owners may not have wanted, and you pay the previous owners off basically with their own money. Is the way it sounds, you know,
screwy.
But there are people like I can think
for it.
It's not a question of falling for it. My own great grandfather and grandfather, and my father wasn't really in business, but my great grandfather and grandfather Ortel were anti-debt, and they're people who debt is bad, and so if you have a memory of the Depression, which they both did, vivid memories, or more than one depression in the case of my great grandfather, who was born in 1869, you just don't like debt. Right. And so you operate your business and you say, you know, I'll do it, and I'm never going to borrow against these assets. I'm simply going to, you know, make money, I'll pay my bills on time, I won't ask credit for other people. And so people like that, you're never going to convince them that they ought to go and borrow, you know, $80 million against the value of their business. They'll say, look, I just don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And then they say, okay, well, how would you like a check for $20 million in cash?
Changes their mind pretty quick.
Well, and they say, okay, well, that's fine. And then you let KKR lever the thing up with the 80 million or whatever. And so it's not crooked. It's a different it's a different approach to basically leverage. Some people don't borrow and other people can't stop borrowing. Think about the Clintons. Think about, you know, the people who are...
Why do the Clintons need to borrow anything? They're just
They steal it, yeah. I should say they don't borrow, they just steal things. But anyway, so getting back to the importance of this summit, one of my arguments, which I'm developing and writing now in articles and whatever, is that the last 30 years has been a war against, cronies have waged a war, international globalist cronies have waged a war against working men and women, not simply in the United States, but around the world. Donald Trump has faults, but I think he perceives that. He's tapped into that vein. And it's something that you see evidence of in data, the UNCTAD data that we went through last time. Yeah. You can see, you know, convincing data. This data is prepared, by the way, by the globalists who are trying to make the argument this has worked really well. So you use their own data and you say, not so much, fool. And so Trump saw this, right? People in various Western European countries are seeing it. Some Asian countries are seeing it. And Vladimir Putin, we've been through this a little bit, and during the day-to-day preparing for today's show, I did notice that his popularity has plummeted recently in Russia. In March, it was up at like 69%, and now, or 68%, and now it's 49%.
Wow.
And that's in part because I think the impact of these sanctions has had an effect. But in addition, Russia has a demographic problem that the United States does not have. The first part of the demographic problem is that their men die very early on average, 50, 55, 60. And that's
probably
because they
booze and cigarettes.
Too much drinking and hard lives. And so when you think about, I've never been inside a big city. I've just, as you know, been to the rural part of Russia briefly on a snowmobiling trip from Finland, and you know, we weren't doing anything bad. Don't worry, we're just having fun. Yeah, I know, but I know the way you look. What was he doing?
Snowmobiling in Finland.
What was he doing? And what exactly did Gorbachev? You know,
Indeed.
he's still alive. Yeltsin. No, we were just snowmobiling in Russia,
Right.
and in Finland. So, but you go back to that period, 1992, 1988. You know, this was a period of great change, and who was the first U.S. president, you know, to get involved promoting a new world order, as you...
Well, it was George H.W. in
H.W.
1992 in his famous speech at the UN.
Right, and that didn't work out so well, either for his election or for the rest of the world. And then Bill Clinton, you know, ended up winning, in quotes, the 1992 election, and thanks to Ross Perot.
I got to look into trying to interview Ross Perot. I doubt he would.
And another thing.
Exactly.
But, you know, so he went along with this global stuff, and that looked like it was working for a while under Bill Clinton. And you have to say, you know, fair is fair. Between 92 and 2000, the economy, the U.S. economy did produce a large number of jobs. Now,
But I think that had more to do with the once-in-a-lifetime explosive growth of the internet being introduced to the public at large. It was literally like a whole new world opening up.
that was later in the period. So the internet was 94, and
But 92 to 2000 we're talking about. I mean,
Right.
that was a technology explosion unlike anything. I mean, it was basically like the Industrial Revolution.
well, I would argue it's a series of things. So at that time, the Soviet Union had been, you know, a dread force that threatened any sensible person who was thinking through, who wasn't in the Soviet Union, investing internationally. I mean, why would you put money anywhere near a place that the Soviets could overrun in a conflict? So when it blew up in 92, that really changed conditions. When China in 88, after Tiananmen Square, in I think June, July of 88, whenever that was, when they announced that they were going to go forward and try to join the international capitalist system, and when India switched in the mid-90s from socialism towards India Inc., you know, and
Not the writing stuff, but
right, yeah, you know,
India
in the INC
Incorporated.
period, exactly.
Yeah.
Those were big changes, but beyond those changes, there was an even bigger change than all the above, and that is that the number of post-World War II adults that entered the workforce was gigantic. We had I've done work on this and articles about it. You can go back and you can look up the makeup of the population of any country, but the U.S. has good statistics going back into 1880 or something like that. And you can see that the prime demographic, persons aged 25 to 54, the people who spend the most, have families, start saving, you know, are start businesses, build businesses, you know, the people who are prone to be very active in the economy. That slug of people was a large number of people coming into our economy, just as all these other international factors made the U.S. position a very interesting position to build out around the world. So it was a very unusual set of conditions. It may never happen again for the U.S.
right.
And the decisions that lead you to a place of having that many persons aged 25 to 54 actually go all the way back to 1918, to the Spanish flu year,
Whoa.
and then to the Depression, when people decided not to have children. And then after World War II, they decided we're going to have a lot of baby, and then it took another 18, 25 years after that to get those people aged and educated enough to participate in the economy. So very unusual set of circumstances. We, you know, rode that, and it looked like we could do nothing wrong. Then 9/11 happened. We embraced the security state, which was a big mistake. You know, I love the people who defend this country, thankful for their sacrifice, but this notion that you should surrender control over your lives to unelected bureaucrats who are not controlled by anybody, and let these people run riot around the world and concoct their crooked schemes and launder dirty money and finance dirty politicians, that is a long period of mistake grave error that's happened since September 11th, 2001.
But is it a mistake? It's not like we had a choice. It just sort of happened.
No, we did have a choice. We could have stood up as American voters and said, no, you can't take our freedoms away. No, you can't.
How did we have an option to do, like the Patriot Act? They did it in Congress, and they're just...
Right, but that's the 2016 election as an example. I mean, beginning in 2010, right? Americans are very patient. We watched as initially after September 11th, 2001, the economy stumbled, but then it started to rocket, and then we had the crash in 2007, 8, 9, and then we started rethinking, and then the Tea Party emerged, and we gave Barack Obama a chance, too many chances in my view. He royally screwed up the economy and royally screwed up the balance of our relationships around the world. I mean, now we have these people carping about Donald Trump, daring to suggest that, we maybe Vladimir Putin might have a point or two that we should listen to. Yeah. And they forget about the period when Barack Obama, immediately after being sworn in, January 20th, I think it was 2009, he went on this worldwide apology tour. We did this wrong and that wrong, and all nations are great, and we should lead from behind. I mean, the number of foolish things that this person said, and that these people in the mainstream media said, oh boy, this man is a genius. Leading from behind, I never thought of that before. Did you notice all these cars? Everybody steers their car from the back seat. Yeah. Not so much. Some fire trucks, yes. But, it was foolish idea after foolish idea, embraced by the glitterati, the media, the academics, etc. Give the guy, he's been in office for a week. Let's give him a Nobel Peace Prize.
Unbelievable. But what you were saying about surrendering to these globalists who want to control our lives, that I think leads us right into what Donald Trump was doing at the summit. He's, all the people on the news and all of these sort of dopes are shocked that he's just not just immediately agreeing with what these unelected, super clandestine secret agencies say, and he's going against them. How could he possibly do that? He should want us all to be led by these duplicitous, unknown, unelected people who are the same ones who claim there were weapons of mass destruction that led us to all of those problems you're talking about.
Exactly. And one of the things I have learned with the Clintons, now watching them closely for 3 years, is that when they accuse you of something, they're basically telegraphing what they themselves are doing. So when they get up there and they say, Donald Trump's colluding with the Russians, that's because the Clintons have been colluding with the Russians since 1992 when they got in bed with Yeltsin and Mark Rich to rape and pillage and corrupt the former Soviet Union and Central Europe, among other places.
That's the part we really need to emphasize, is that it seems like a lot of things, like yesterday, came home to roost that got planted in 1991 and 1992 all around perestroika and the dissolution of the Soviet Union and the formation of these separate new countries where we've got these oligarchs, and we've heard about people buying, Lee Stranahan was talking about individuals who were able to buy literally for like $7,000 things and assets and companies that are now worth hundreds of millions.
Right, and you see, that's capitalism run amok, and that's why, I think actually you could say what you want about Vladimir Putin, and no doubt, I'm a KGB officer, a senior KGB officer, still in power and president of Russia. And
got some skeletons in the closet.
May have the odd skeleton in his closet. But, when it comes time to talking about skeletons in closets, I mean, how many, just let's not to be too rough on Barack Obama, but why don't we talk about Benghazi? I mean, just pick on the 4 people who are dead. They're still dead, because of the mistakes. The 4 Americans who are still dead, and who knows how many Libyans and Syrians and other people.
Well, and calling it a mistake is possibly generous.
And Hillary Clinton, thinking she's going to come in there like Caesar Augustus and say, I came, I saw, I conquered. I mean, this is a level of narcissism and really criminality.
Psychopathy.
Exactly. I can't say that again.
Psychopathy.
That's a big word.
Thank you. I had to get a Scrabble board out here and get some bonus points for that.
So what I think what Donald Trump is actually doing, people accuse him of just talking all the time and not listening. I think he's been listening carefully. He's been sending teams around the world to listen carefully and to think, in new ways, comprehensively about these vexing problems that the bureaucrat class just wants to exist forever, because if you solve the problem, you don't need the bureaucrats to care about the problem, and
that exactly mirrors what Bill Binney said to me the other day, and what he said was one of the largest problems in our secret agencies and in the military is this introduction of contractors and people who are sniffing around these things for money. They're not really motivated to solve problems. They're motivated to provide solutions to ongoing problems, and so they have a way of making sure that they don't get solved, so that they don't lose their contract, they don't lose their budget, they don't lose their money. And this thinking seems to have permeated these agencies, because something that just came up that I definitely wanted to talk to you about in my conversation with Larry Nichols just an hour ago, when Peter Strzok's wife was promoted to the SEC,
right, enforcement, yeah.
Right. The guy that left was named Stephen Cohen. Do you know where he went to?
No.
Sidley Austin.
That's
Isn't
where
that
Obama,
a law firm where Obama's?
Yeah. Well, so yeah, these large professional services firms, whether they are accounting firms, law firms, investment advisory firms,
private
or
intelligence
banks,
firms.
Well, staying away from them for a second, the ones who do perform in theory real services, they are very good at figuring out, we got to get top Democrats, top Republicans on our team, and so the fact that Goldman Sachs would hire people, or Sidley Austin, which really, I actually use Sidley and Austin for one thing. It's a very good firm, an investment management, and other things.
But it's a law firm, right?
It's a very good law firm, yeah. It's not surprising that you would see the former head of SEC, enforcement of the SEC, go to a firm like Sidley and Austin.
But my question is, do they say, hey, Stephen Cohen, we need to kind of shuffle you out of here immediately to shove in Peter Strzok's secret wife, and we don't want you saying anything, so here's a nice job for $1 million a year at a big law firm?
It's more than $1 million. Unfortunately, there needs to be some real balance put back into regulation, particularly of publicly traded securities, debt and equity. And I have long argued, and you look at General Electric, which is what I started with.
Hard to see him now.
But it's still, there's a very good article actually in the Wall Street Journal, and I'm going to be speaking to the reporter next week when he gets back. But firms like that are able, the big ones are so much bigger and so have so much more financial resource than even the SEC. So when the SEC tries to regulate or bring one of these companies to heel, it's very tough to do it.
Right.
Just on the issue of trying to understand what he's all about, it's so complicated. How do you figure it out? Who do you hire to help you? So there really needs to be much more balance, or a rebalancing of the power of regulated entities and the regulator. And I think one way to do that would be to give the regulator some sort of fair incentive to expose fraud and have the agency be compensated for finding fraud. And then another thing that needs to be done is to curb regulatory excesses, where you have a crooked regulator, which does happen and can happen under both administrations, going after a firm unfairly. So there's a lot of work to do. Anyway, getting back to the summit, this whole meeting with Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump, why has it taken so long to have this meeting?
Right.
It's an obvious thing to do. We look at Russia with their demographic problem, with their vast territory. We together have to control the nuclear arsenal of the world. Why wouldn't it make sense for the United States to have as an objective real peace with a nation like Russia that has this ancient civilization, vast territory, unexploited, and I don't say that in a negative sense, just untapped forest, energy, other water resources.
Natural resources.
A population that has not been able in the modern era to have widespread prosperity the way we do have it in the United States. A population filled with very smart people. I mean, some of the smartest scientists in the world are actually from Russia.
Yeah.
Just that they have a natural gift, I think, to understand math and science and whatever. Great artists. And there's problems in Russia, of course. But where is it written that the intelligentsia, in quotes, in Washington, D.C., should get off, with the absolute right to just say that all Russians are thugs?
Right.
And that's reasonable, and that we ought to have Russians are the bogey people. I mean, that to me is, I guess it's allowed because you're not doing it you're not discriminating against them. You're just being anti-Russian nationalism, I guess. But it's a conceit, and it's a very I mean, it'd be one thing if you wanted to really get, I don't know, pick a smaller country that doesn't have, let's say, the other half of the world's nuclear weapons. Where if you get them reasonably upset, maybe they'll drop one or two of them on you. I mean, pick a poor country like Costa Rica. It doesn't have an army. And why do we, harsh off on Costa Rica?
Then you're not going to be able to get any, blown glass, I think, is a big deal coming out of Costa Rica.
I'll cope. But I mean, it just doesn't seem like it's a fair mind. I mean, we're going to talk about American values and what we like and what we promote. Picking on one country that just happens to be the one that has the second largest, or maybe the largest, store of nuclear weapons on Earth, and deciding that we ought to encourage every American to say that all Russians are thugs and Vladimir Putin's a murderer, and we shouldn't be meeting with him, and the President of the United States doesn't know what he's doing, he shouldn't be allowed to meet with him alone, is ridiculous.
Well, it's going beyond that. It's almost like if you don't dislike Russia, you're immediately distrusted and considered to be a traitor.
Yeah, I know, by this group of people that should basically have their licenses to appear on television, which you don't need, take it away.
I mean, the fact is, Russia is so much more like the United States. They don't want to suppress all women, and granted their views on homosexuality are a little bit antiquated possibly, but they don't throw gay people off of buildings, I don't believe. They're not trying to introduce some religious bound law throughout you're not trying to make a Russian caliphate throughout the world. And they basically, Putin said it yesterday, he just wants to have a lasting peace and security so they can exploit economic resources to their benefit. I mean, the things that make sense coming from a ruler of that country. He's got his own country's interests at heart. And the question that kept coming up, Charles, that I found stupid is, why do you trust Putin over the security agencies? Well, how about we trust neither of them and just listen to what they're both saying and evaluate which makes sense and seems plausible and which is ridiculous and unsupported by facts. Right. It makes sense to me that Putin wants to arrive at an acceptable truce or treaty or agreement of some kind for international peace so that we can get down to the business of helping everybody's economy and improving the lifestyle everywhere, rather than having a war in Syria. I mean, why would Putin want to be at war with the United States? As you've said, their economy is a fraction of ours. It has to be a tremendous struggle for them to try to keep up. And if those resources could be redirected towards more productive things. I remember hearing that at some point Israel had captured a MiG, and it allowed Israel and the United States to disassemble it and really gain a lot of intelligence on the operational, how it's designed and all that. And the engineers for the United States and Israel were absolutely blown away by the performance of this jet, given the low quality of the materials, and it didn't have the high-tech composites and all this stuff. So it's almost like that movie about the Olympic team that was practicing with the heavier weights, and when they got there it was so much easier for them because they had such a disadvantage historically. So it's interesting. Right,
and in particular, I think a starting place, and Putin used, I think, this phrase, a starting place for sort of bridging the knowledge gap, is to focus on the period August 1992 to the present.
Right.
Exactly how did we come from being in a hopeful place in August of 1992 to thinking that we could work with Russia, to the reset button that was the overcharge button of Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, to Russia's decision to feel that it was necessary to go into Crimea. I mean, why did all this happen? It didn't happen because Vladimir Putin and Medvedev were just sitting there saying, today let's invade Crimea. I mean, there's a long series of reasons why Russia is cheesed off at us. And it starts with the undertakings, I believe, that the West, the United States and other Western nations made to the Russians that we would not expand east of Germany, enlarge Germany, and we wouldn't expand NATO in that direction. So what do? We encourage this, and we right away break our word.
And didn't Manafort have something to do with that, working with Ukraine? Lee Stranahan was talking about this. He said that it was at, I believe, Obama's behest that Manafort was there doing something with Ukraine. And now here's that guy stuck in jail. Is it possible, Charles, that they're just like burying anybody who has any piece of the story that could be incriminating to them?
It's highly likely. I mean, and you go into this period. Who is the person? I've never met this person, but from what I can tell, this person is Exhibit A in the swamp, and he's now distinguished head of some institute at Columbia, I think. Jeffrey Sachs.
Jeffrey Sachs.
S-A-C-H-S, Jeffrey Sachs.
I'm a little bit behind, but this is a fantastic graphic where it looks like Sergei Lavrov is telling Hillary that she's misspelled reset.
Yeah, exactly. She's like, what's spelling?
It's like, how do you say dope in Russian? So who's this guy's name? Sachs?
Yeah, S-A-C-H-S.
First name?
Jeffrey, Professor Sachs. I think it might be spelled slightly differently, but yeah.
Google will figure it out. Let's see if we can find him. Is this him?
Yeah.
Columbia? So
just Google him in Russia. I mean, this guy led a team. He was at Harvard when he did this, and he went into the former Soviet Union, and he screwed, I'll use a profanity, he fucked things up in Russia to a fairly well, till he was kicked out of Russia, kicked out of the Soviet Union. And he's an arrogant guy who, of course, he's now at Columbia in charge of some institute. But he's got all the awards. That's the way they work it. They get these professors. You want to do the bidding of the George Soros crowd or whatever. You get your professorship. You get multiple awards. You get books. You get this and institutes. And you go around and you spout happy horseshit. And everybody says, "That's right. That's a genius move."
Yeah.
But his record in the former Soviet Union, and we had all these smart intellectuals who were supposedly going to go over and help Russia, and what I did in Russia, not much good.
Well, it seems like these guys were all basically ransacking Russia. And,
right.
I know, Charles, you don't get very much into talking about September 11th, but one of the things that I've heard about September 11th was that on September 12th, the Security and Exchange Commission, of all groups, invoked some never-before-used emergency powers that were utilized to clear some financial transaction. I apologize for my ignorance. I should know the language better, but something to do with George Bush and the Carlyle Group, and Carlucci, right, runs the Carlyle Group, how they had bought up futures in natural resources in 1991 that were maturing in 2001, and they pushed it through in some emergency kind of a way, and it had to do with stealing, billions and trillions of dollars from the former Soviet Union. And I feel like everything they were talking about yesterday with Bill Browder and now this guy Sachs, these are the plunderers right here.
Well, if you look at
am I way off with that?
Yeah, again, I don't know about the September 11th thing. But when you look at, sadly, what happens when a country like a large, expansive country as the former Soviet Union finally says, all right, we're done. Effectively, we're bankrupt.
Yeah.
What doesn't happen is, the nice people in the universe come out and say, oh, isn't this sad? They're bankrupt. Let's help them out. Let's be generous. No, the brigands come out and they say, wow, these people are desperate. Something that used to be worth $100 million, we can buy for $500,000.
7,000.
And they should be happy for 7,000, or whatever. And I'm not saying that that there's particularly anything wrong with trying to negotiate for the best possible deal that you can get.
Yeah, but particularly taking advantage of.
But what you ought to sit back and say, I'm not going to go, for example, into Puerto Rico now, which is still on its on its back. I don't think they have electricity up and running yet. I'm not going to go down there and steal everybody's home.
Right.
Because
you can.
Because you can. As a government, let's say. You shouldn't be doing this as a government.
But this is what George Soros has said he must do. He says he can't consider morality when he's involved in business. And I remember thinking about that and thinking, why can't you do a moral business?
You absolutely can. Now, Ted Malloch has written books about moral capitalism, and absolutely you can, especially when you think through. It's actually in your, forgetting about what is right and wrong for a second, it's in your interest as an investor, if you're going to have a workforce, to have a loyal, motivated workforce. You don't want to, unless you're going to operate a criminal false charity enterprise like the Clintons.
Who would do that?
You don't want to have a bunch of people around you who, are the worst of the worst, who are quite happy to, to skin the consumer alive. What you want to do is you want to bring people into your organization, pay them a fair wage, give them an opportunity to flourish and to build families and to help their community and to feel fulfilled in the work that they're doing with you. That's a positive place to be. Yeah. And indeed, that's the way a lot of industry does indeed function, even in these tough times. So
I wanted to show this to you, Charles. This is something that I saw a while ago that kind of made me think a little differently about Putin. This was an issue with some of these oligarchs, including Oleg Deripaska, who had sort of taken over the aluminum industry in this country or town. I forget exactly the details, but people can watch this video. And Putin went there, and that's Oleg Deripaska there. He got all of the industry leaders together and basically forced them to, he's chastising them that their greed, their incompetence, their ambition had destroyed these towns. All the workers were out of work, and he made them sign this agreement to reopen the aluminum factories and give everybody back their back pay and everything. And he went through this crowd and he made sure everybody signed it. And what we're going to see right here is that he notices on the page that Oleg Deripaska, who looks very troubled throughout this meeting, didn't sign. And he calls him out and demands that he says, did everybody sign this agreement? Yes, yes. And he says, Deripaska, have you signed? And he lies to him. He says he has, and he says he can't see his signature. Calls him out in front of everyone, specifically brought this news crew there so this would go out on television, forces him to sign, which is, in my view, I've known a lot of Russians just from my first marriage, and this is a huge emasculation, and then he demands his pen back. So he's basically totally showing Mr. Deripaska, who's one of the wealthiest men, I believe, in the world, certainly in Russia, showing him who's boss. And I think that
Isn't he CrowdStrike?
Deripaska?
Yeah.
I'm not sure that he's involved with CrowdStrike. That's Sean Henry and how could I forget the guy's name all of a sudden? Not Deripaska. Oh,
there's some connection to this mess involving Deripaska.
Well, we should find out if there is.
We'll do that in another moment.
We'll do that later. But I'm just saying, that clip was interesting to me because it showed, whether you agree with Putin or disagree with him, as President Trump said yesterday, he is a strong competitor, and whether he's an enemy or good or evil, forget about that. He is a very effective politician. He is a very effective strategic opponent in anything, and someone to be taken quite seriously. So the notion that Donald Trump should have gone there and just started insulting him is absolutely idiotic, and I think that the success of the summit can be gauged in Mr. Putin's reaction, both during the press conference with President Trump and the subsequent interview with Chris Wallace, where, I thought Putin slapped Chris Wallace down in an impressive way.
Right. Well, I think that's correct, and I think we'll wait and see. I mean, since in the last 24 hours, in the last several hours, Donald Trump has now walked back what he said.
I was so disappointed by that.
Yeah, and so we'll see how Putin reacts to that. But that said, we do have some slides. I don't know if you want to go through them or not.
Yes, absolutely. Dmitry Alperovitch, of course, is the CTO of CrowdStrike. And is Deripaska involved?
I was confused on that.
Yeah, I think he's not. But yes, the slides, absolutely. Let's get to the slides.
And we'll go very quickly through these. We wanted to, what we like to do is remind everybody that we do have a First Amendment right still in this country. And
we're using it while it lasts.
Yeah, exactly. We're using it as much of it as possible. And we do like to ground our analysis in evidence, and we try to provide links to that evidence. We encourage our viewers to come to us with suggestions and comments. And thank you for those of you who do that. I read each of them carefully, and I try to respond to most of them in a timely fashion. And I appreciate them. We've done a large number of shows. I guess this will be a bumper week with a whole bunch of shows, but they're arranged by Jason in this fashion here. You can go back if you want to look at, there's quite a few of them, and I guess lots of people are now watching these, which we're very pleased to see, and making comments and circulating them around. It's past time to go back through this and curate it, and we will be doing that, but our mission in all of this is to try to prod the U.S. and other governments to actually fix the problem of charity fraud, and specifically of the vast network of still unprosecuted Clinton fake charities.
Yeah.
So that's where we're spending the bulk of our time.
Yeah.
If we go to the next...
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I've been doing an unusual amount on this show, but I do always like to remind people, Charles, that they can follow you on Twitter, if they're not already doing that, at Charles Ortel, and they can also go to charlesortel.com to read articles that you've written and just enjoy the wealth of information that you've got posted there. So I always like to remind everybody of that.
Well, thanks for that, Jason.
Yeah,
Appreciate
no
it.
problem.
So if we go to quickly through this, and let's not pull up any slides here, and all of them. We'll just go through a few of them. So really what I think Trump and Putin, the headline that I took away, the biggest headline, was that they were officially trying to call off Cold War II, which of course is bad news if you're a defense contractor, or if you're a politician who depends on large regular checks into your political action committees, your institutes, etc., from these defense contractors. And honestly, when I look at the numbers, which I'm a numbers nerd, when you look at them, you have to shake your head that quickly. But anyway,
well, I'm saying you're looking at them. I'm agreeing.
But so you look at the amount of spending. The U.S. government is now officially spending $700 billion per year, rising to $716 on defense. Now, I heard that number and I thought, well, China must be spending, $400 billion. And it's nowhere close.
We're like 50 times more.
Yeah. And so I think the way I would look at that, if I were not an American, if I were Putin, I'd look at it sort of a number of ways. I'd say, well, why are they spending so much money on building up their vast military? I mean, who are they going to go for? Well, of course, one of the people we go for, because Mattis has said it, the number one enemy of the United States of America is officially Russia. So you're sitting there and you've got a large nuclear arsenal, and you see this country, you look at the press and it's anti-Russia, spending more money. Does spending more money and not even talking to Vladimir Putin and stiff-arming him and insulting him, is that likely to be a productive, yield a productive result for the mass of Americans? And I think the answer is certainly not.
Just an interesting photo of them. Why do they say that Russia's the biggest enemy? And that in and of itself seems like a remarkably provocative thing to do.
Right. Well, I'm sure different elements of the Russian military have been provoking nations around the world, flying close into our territory, sending submarines in different places. But we do a fair amount of that ourselves. I mean, we send our fleet right through supposed international water, well, truly international waters off the Spratlys, et cetera, where the Chinese are trying to establish illegally a presence there. So people do these types of things. Well, the starting place is, okay, why are we spending $700 billion? Why do we need to do that? And of course, all the military generals on Fox and all the shows are saying, wow, Russia's this and Russia's that. We need to have an enemy because we got to spend all this money. And I'm not saying, we shouldn't have a robust military. Of course we should. But I'd like to see the troops paid better, and I'd like to see less money spent on gigantic weapon systems that, and new generation planes that may or may not ever work. And I
the Chinese got it to work, apparently. They stole the plans or bought them from Hillary's server, and they now have the J-31, I think, is the Chinese copy of the F-35, and it works better.
Is that right?
I believe that's true. Petraeus spoke about that at the same meeting where he, offered the suggestion of destroying China, which was absurd. I mean, it's interesting to me that Mr. Putin complimented Donald Trump by saying that, which I agree with, the North Korean negotiations seem to be starting to go in the right direction. And that's just it. I think Trump overstates it when he says he's already solved that problem. Right. And I think that the bubbleheads on the news are equally stupid to say, oh, he had lunch with the guy. How come he didn't fix this already? It's like, you just have to start it. But if it's always saber rattling and saying Russia's the biggest enemy and North Korea is part of the axis of evil with Iraq, Iran, and China, that's certainly not the way to start it off. I think most people have a difficult time, and there's this, a lot of people want to convince you that, like, oh, Dennis Rodman could never be the ambassador to North Korea because he's not a diplomat. But I personally feel that Dennis Rodman has done more for the relationship with North Korea than any previous diplomat. And so these unconventional approaches are often great. Ronald Reagan is, I believe, famous for saying, why don't we just invite Gorbachev to dinner? And they all said, you're crazy, you can't do that. But obviously, that's the first step towards establishing a dialogue with anyone, is having a personal communication, a personal relationship. If they hated each other, I think even in this photo where they're looking into each other's eyes, obviously it's cliche to say that a picture tells 1,000 words, but they both look very serious to me in that photograph, and like both men realize that many, many lives count on them arriving at a reasonable solution to some extremely complicated problems, and they both look serious about arriving at that solution, to me.
Yeah, they do. They do. And I think actually we heard Putin say, I forget whether it was in the Wallace interview or I think it might have been the Wallace interview, that a lot of people in Russia and the United States had spent months preparing for the summit, which I think is a good sign. A good sign. If we could just...
Why do you think that?
Because that's the way diplomacy should be done. You get teams of people, hopefully selected, from outside the normal chain of command as well as inside the normal chain of command, and you say, listen, we've been at loggerheads. You have to rate relations between the former Soviet Union, now Russia, and the United States as an F, right?
Yes.
It's a total F. Whatever we have been doing in the past certainly didn't
not
work.
Working, right.
We are lucky that there has not been nuclear war.
Yeah.
So far. Okay, so we forget the people, who've been spending the last 40 years of their lives working on this problem. They don't understand how to fix it.
Right.
They just understand how to get paid caring about it.
Right.
Let's get some fresh people to think about this. And, that's what I think they tried to do. Now, of course, we don't really know just how far along Donald Trump and his team is in going after the corruption, going after the fraud that has been involved with both parties, particularly in this country, promoting unregulated globalism and big government and big contracts and crony capitalism. We don't know how far they've gotten, but by their yelling and screaming and mocking and the coordinated assault on Donald Trump yesterday was, frankly, in some ways it was humorous, because, I watched the press conference and I was looking there and saying, this really went pretty well, I thought. It was very professional and good interaction, sensible comments from both people, blah, blah, blah. And I went away to go do something, and I come back, and I look at the TV again like 2 hours later, and it's just Shepard Smith is having a conniption fit.
Yeah, they act like Trump showed up drunk or something.
Yeah, it's like, yeah. I mean, let's just think about George H.W. Bush. I mean, he goes and meets with the Japanese prime minister and throws up on him in dinner.
Oh yeah,
right. I mean, at least he didn't throw up on Putin.
Right. That was definitely bad. I mean, if I was going to criticize the performance at all, I would say that this is what I wanted to ask you, because you've obviously met many, many more billionaires than I have. I don't know if I've met one, but it just seems to me that when you're dealing with someone who is a billionaire, how many billionaires are there in the world? A few hundred?
No, thousands.
A few thousand, okay. But out of all the hundreds of millions and billions of people, it's a small subset of humanity that overcomes whatever and makes the right moves to become that wealthy. They are special individuals in some way. And just like when you're dealing with someone who's a super genius at math or a musical genius or a computer genius, sometimes these people, they fall on this, spectrum. And I'm not a doctor, of course, whether it's Asperger's or autism or whatever. And there's the totally dysfunctional end and there's the totally not having it at all. And it's been said that these billionaires tend to fall on that spectrum because they're so sharp in this area that maybe they're lacking a little bit in social skills. And sometimes Donald Trump actually frequently says things that make me kind of wish he stopped talking 5 minutes ago. Because although I agree with the direction that he's going in and I think that his heart is in the right place, I think he makes a lot of verbal gaffes and getting into how many points he won the Electoral College by, whatever. That didn't seem like the right way for him to take the conversation, but that's as critical as I would get. I think the fact that he initiated this diplomatic effort, the fact that he and Putin clearly seem to be getting along to the extent that they're having a dialogue, complimenting each other on things that I agree they both did well, and there seemed to be a subtext to the text of what was being said that led me to believe that both Trump and Putin have ideas that they are hatching, and that together these two countries, and specifically those two men, would have the ability to exercise powers that truly frighten the deep state.
Oh, absolutely.
And these people that they were talking about, particularly Bill Browder. I know we're going to get to that. I want to hear what you have to tell us about that.
Well, I think it's people like George Soros, who is persona non grata in Russia, and Browder, we'll get to him in a second, but certainly Brennan. Why don't we, this one here, this link is worth bringing up. This is the American Spectator, I think.
Yes, John Brennan.
And the title of this piece is pretty funny just on itself, on its own merit. If we can make it a bit smaller.
Mrs. Communist Russia.
John Brennan. And, I got to say that, the spectacle, which is not, it's not fiction, in the immediate aftermath of the summit, John Brennan, who's collecting a pension from the U.S. government, has the nerve of accusing the sitting president of the United States while he's on foreign soil of committing treason.
Yeah.
And this is a man, and I think we're going to hear, you said from Donald Trump on the Tucker Carlson interview, we're going to hear him characterize Brennan as a really bad person. Yeah. I think we have to ask the question, Americans deserve to know, how in the hell, and I would use a different word, but how in the hell did John Brennan end up replacing the person you mentioned, David Petraeus, as head of the CIA? How did he pass a real security test? Did he pass a real security test? How many alias emails has he sent? How many private servers does he use? And does the guy know how to smile? I mean, this is a guy, he's just like...
Found the most pissed off dude they could possibly find.
Yeah, it's just like a nasty man, right? I'm going to get you. I mean, is this the person you really want to have as head of the CIA?
I mean, having a badass as the head of the CIA is okay. My problem is he's just a liar. He seems like a traitor. He's doing, why? Why is he tweeting that? Is it treason? What's treason about it? The fact that he didn't just blanketly accept...
There's nothing treasonable about it, but there's everything treasonable about this guy's behavior. And how many secrets did John Brennan walk out the door of the CIA with and transfer to private control? Did John Brennan mishandle classified information? Right. I'm sure he did. Did James Comey mishandle classified information? We know he did. You know, what were these two people doing, Brennan and Comey, during the whole decision to allow an idiot who was under FBI investigation for mishandling classified information? That would be Hillary Rodham Clinton. Hillary Rotten Clinton.
Yeah.
You know, she's under FBI investigation from July 10th, 2015. Comey had to know about it. He's still there. Brennan had to know about it. And so what do these idiots do? They say, let's run her for president of the United States. She can't win. I mean, lose, or whatever.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
The longer all this goes on, Charles, I just feel like the conspirators are identifying themselves through their behavior. Why would he be so adamant about, you know, I mean, again, there's a way to criticize the performance yesterday, but say, look, you know what, we all should really appreciate that we've got a president who's more interested in engaging in diplomacy than saber rattling, but I'd love it if Donald Trump wouldn't talk about himself so much while he's engaging in diplomacy.
Well, I mean, I agree with the concept of not talking about yourself is a good idea. And, you know, go back and read some of Barack Obama's speeches and do the I count. See how many times he says, I, my legacy, or whatever in his various speeches, but doesn't make it right. Anyway, we go back to the slides. Even, we don't need to pull this up, but even Barack Obama rebuked Clinton. Now this
Clinton or
Trump.
What did he say?
He gave a speech in South Africa where he.
This looks like a toilet. What's he standing in front of it?
That's no way to. Don't go there. He's in South Africa. You don't want to say anything about what kind of a country that might be.
I didn't really know. It was just literally from my angle, it looks like he's standing in a toilet.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So, but if we go back into the slides, it's okay. Yes. Here's a real expert. This fellow who was on Tucker. Stephen Cohen. This is a man who did not vote for Donald Trump. Okay, I don't know if he's a Bernie supporter or a Clinton supporter.
No, wait a minute. Is this the guy who was calling for an overthrow? There's all these Stephen Cohens flying around.
This is the good one. I mean, this is a NYU professor. You might have.
Oh, I think I've actually communicated with this guy. I
wanted
to interview him, but he said he doesn't do interviews.
Yeah, he's a very smart guy. And look at his point. You know, it's a kangaroo court. And that's this impulse. It's so dangerous to have, as the resistance likes to do, to have lynch mobs decide that, you know, the right way to do things is if you disagree with somebody, you know, you immediately need to fire them, convict them, no trial, no evidence, no nothing. You know, if you dare to go down this, of course you're an idiot. You know, and that's, you know, these are people who say that, you know, and denigrate the founders and denigrate the Constitution, really are stupid. By their statements, they're displaying their ignorance. I mean, what should make this country great is that we have a system of justice where you actually are innocent until proven guilty, where you have a speedy trial, where you have a right to be judged by a jury of your peers, not by political enemies. You know, this is what makes the country special. But instead, this group that is trying to topple Donald Trump and wanted to keep us, you know, treat us like a bunch of mushrooms in the dark covered in shit, you know, this is the team that is now ranting and raving because Donald Trump is coming very close to fulfilling enough of his promises to put these resistors, to put these corrupt cronies in a place where they will never in their lifetimes hold power again, and where some among them may never in their lifetimes see freedom again. Because I think where this is going now, Donald Trump has been very careful, and his people careful, to, you know, be patient, understand how dangerous this is, understand the full facts and evidence, and move into a place where I think you're going to start to see the rhetoric ratchet it up. This was not Comey doing this. This was not Brennan doing this. This was Barack Obama and Valerie Jarrett and George Soros and people behind the Obama, big funders to the Obama and Clinton criminal enterprise, and for that matter, Bush criminal enterprise. You know, deciding that we're just not, you know, we are not going to let this rube who will stand up to us, you know, have control over the executive branch. And even though he, quote, won, we're going to try to contest it, then we're going to resist it, now we're going to try to impeach him. I mean, this is not the way, these are not our values. I mean, this is not the way you approach things. And I think that interview with the real Russian, you don't need to put it back up, it's really worth spending time reading.
And I think yesterday was really a turning point because it really, as I said, all of the chatter around it made me say, why are these guys getting so upset that these two men are finally coming together? And, Larry Nichols pointed out that he felt if Trump did go there and start insulting him and doing what it is that everyone's now saying they wanted him to do, that the script would have been, oh, he's risking nuclear war and he's a buffoon and whatever, and that would have never worked. But the real fear is struck in their hearts now that Donald Trump and Vladimir, like Putin's going to be golfing at Mar-a-Lago by September or October.
Well, and who knows what Vladimir Putin's people may have already given to the Trump administration. We're going to get to this in a bit, but it's highly likely that the wizards in the Russian secret services and the hacking community over there, and the wizards in China, and the wizards in Israel, and the wizards around the world, the second they saw stumble-bum Hillary Clinton, and Barack Obama get together and authorize this private server in, Chappaqua and wherever, the community was like, we can get that stuff. And they've long had this stuff. They've long had these emails. More than one nation, I believe, has had these emails. Our own NSA has probably had these emails. And so what really happened yesterday in Helsinki is there was a we won't say to Jesus, but there was a come to, the world leader moment where all of a sudden it was the Trump-Putin show. Yeah. And people who thought you could play Trump off against Putin and ratchet up, they just discovered that that's not going to happen. Yeah. And now they have to be. I mean, Hillary was quoted as saying, we have to win, otherwise, I forget what she said.
We'll hang or whatever.
We'll hang or whatever. They know, the Clintons know just how long, and the Obamas know, and the Bushes know just how long they've been operating and tolerating and enabling this crooked, corrupt system of fake charities and money laundering and corruption in government. They know how long it's been going on. They know how much money they may have gotten because of it. And the people who've been, seeding this corruption, the Soroses and other people, they know they're guilty.
And he's called out by name by Putin. Do you think yesterday was the worst day in Hillary Clinton's life since November 9th, 2016?
It wasn't a great moment for her. Not at all.
It seems like Donald Trump is closing in.
Indeed. So we won't hit the link, but everyone knows that we love these people at Conservative Treehouse, whoever they may be. And it's time, I guess we will hit the link.
People love the links, Charles.
All right. So I love this headline, Paranoia May Destroy Ya.
Is that, we got some ad or something? What just happened there?
But if you go back into the body, basically what Trump, I think, is about to do here is to declassify a large number of documents that will allow we the people to see just how dirty and corrupt Rod Rosenstein and his people still in the Justice Department, John Brennan, the IRS, Sally Yates, many, the Clintons, of course, just how crooked these people are. And actually, what will really, I think, inflame passions is when the Clintons come to realize, and the Obamas and others, that they themselves were played by the extremely crooked people who sit on top of this whole massive corruption. And that's when you're really going to see, I think, the swamp get drained.
Is it scary to you, Charles, that 129,000 people are liking this nonsense from Sally Yates and 162 like James Comey, saying that this is the day an American president stood on foreign soil next to a murderous lying thug and refused to back his own country? That is just such a misstatement. I mean, Hillary Clinton, how come he doesn't refer to her as a murderous lying thug?
Well, I think it's actually, to answer the first part of your question, 63 million people, in theory, voted for Hillary Clinton. So this is a tiny fraction of those.
That's true.
So it's not particularly unnerving. And maybe they're finally getting sick and tired, to use that phrase again, of Hillary Clinton. But it's not surprising at all. I mean, look, how many people watch that silly YouTube channel that's the #1 channel with the whipped cream and all that? I mean, it's tens of millions of people.
I don't know what channel that is.
It's
StormyDaniels.com?
No, she's not getting much of a following.
I think she got arrested for something.
Yeah. So turning then to Browder.
Yes.
Here's a piece by Browder himself in Yahoo. Now, Yahoo is deeply suspicious to me.
I agree.
But at Time and Yahoo, right away, he's trying to plead his case. So Browder's case, as I understand it, he claims he was the grandson, not the son, the grandson of somebody who decided it would be a good idea to run for president during the worst moments of the Cold War as the president of the U.S. Communist Party. So his gene pool is a little bit suspect here. But
what's going on with Yahoo?
So Browder then decided, he's the grandson of that guy, he decided that his contacts in the former Soviet Union would be helpful, so he'd set up this fund, Hermitage, to play in the former Soviet Union, and got some very rich investors. I believe the Ziff family, Z-I-F-F, were involved.
Publishing, right?
Ziff Publishing, and very shrewd family, lots of money, billionaires, now investors. And they went into Russia, and his side of the story is that they were trying with the foreign capital to go into Russia and to eliminate corruption and modernize these old companies and buy in cheap and fix things up and be corporate raiders basically.
Mm-hmm.
Putin's side of the story is that actually what they were doing is they made vast profits, did not pay taxes either in Russia or elsewhere. But the stunning part of Putin's claim, was he got up on that podium yesterday and he accused Bill Browder of saying, I know he didn't pay taxes on the money, and I think he said something like, but I believe...
It may have been legal, the $400 million sent to the Clintons.
It may have been legal that the intelligence services of the U.S. and Bill Browder and his people sent $400 million to the Clintons. Now, that is as to quantum, that is a massive amount of money, $400 million within the context of the Clinton Foundation. There is no declared donor other than this firm Unitaid that has given anywhere close to $400 million officially to the Clinton Foundation. So A, that's not in the Clinton Foundation books that I see anywhere, but B, one thing you certainly can't do as a foreign person, which Browder became as a UK citizen, I think, you certainly cannot route $400 million to a political campaign. And
he renounced his U.S. citizenship to avoid paying taxes.
Yeah, and so, but the point here is, and if I were the Clintons right now, one of the reasons the swamp monsters are probably very nervous is that, if you assume that Vladimir Putin will never cooperate with America, then you can be very sure that any secret files that he may have on these transfers, and there would be evidence of transfers out of Russia to the United States, if that evidence is going to be made available to Donald Trump and the Justice Department, the IRS, then you are in serious trouble. I mean, if Russia would actually start cooperating and explain, their side of the story, why is it when Russia supposedly warned America about the Tsarnaev brothers, who exactly told Russia to pound sand? What was really going on? Well, who knows? I mean, but there's Russian files on that side of the story. So, what do their files say? What was really going on in Skolkovo? What was really going on with Anna Chapman? What was really going on with Uranium One? If all of a sudden, Donald Trump can get cooperation out of Vladimir Putin and his people and can compare notes. We have files, they have files, they're missing files. We start looking at all the stuff together, and then we go back into history, a history that starts September 4th, 2011, with Bob Mueller taking over the FBI.
Right.
Before September 11th, we get into that history, and we start looking at all these problematical things, and we start, coming to the realization, how many people in the American security services may have been aware of the Clinton Foundation frauds, may have been using the Clinton Foundation to route their own money around the world, and may have given the Clintons a pass. So how many people were playing along with that? How may those people have been rewarded? This starts to become a very, very interesting and challenging story, one that will ultimately shock the American electorate out of their complacency and say, no, wait a minute. Hillary Clinton should not have been allowed to operate the State Department the way she did, with all these billions missing and Now the Clinton Foundation billions are missing. These other things, what the hell's going on? You're asking us to pay more in taxes.
Yeah.
So you could squander these billions and live the high life.
400 million that they paid no taxes on. How many American families would you need to put together to make 400 million in income?
Right.
Kind of a lot.
Quite a few.
Charles, I wanted to ask you about this because the timing of Robert Mueller's indictment of these 12 Russians seemed coincidental to me, and there was this article on Friday in True Pundit talking about how the indictment plagiarized something from a person we've met, saying that Mueller's special counsel office has plagiarized a federal civil suit filed by George Webb Swigert. And I know you're not a lawyer, but it just strikes me as so odd. How would Robert Mueller's people even know that that suit was there? Are they combing Pacer and looking through for? They are.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I mean they have a vast team. The Trump people.
But is that a regular practice? Find some random person's lawsuit and steal language and ideas from it to put together our indictment? That seems so outside the realm of something that would reasonably happen.
You would hope that that's not standard, but I mean, given this team of witch hunters, passionate anti-Trump hating Democrats who are on the Mueller team, somebody came, I won't reveal his name, but came to me out of the blue and just using, logic, the percentage probability that anybody or that Mueller would, looking for the best talent out there, assemble a team that consisted of 13 rabid anti-Trump, pro-Hillary Democrats is so low, right? It's not like there are no lawyers out there looking for work, right? I mean, you could have found a team that was representative.
Well, they all got jobs at Sidley Austin, apparently.
Did they afterwards? Yeah.
Perkins Coie, I don't know. There's a lot of openings in Washington, D.C. This is the other thing I wanted to ask you about Sidley Austin. Now, not about them specifically, but just in general about the concept of practicing law in Washington, D.C. Just from what I've observed from seeing Chris Gowan in court and the way that he conducted the defense of Imran Awan, how he regularly offered information to the court that seems quite clearly to be provably false, and with no concern at all about making false statements in court or not having to represent what he's saying with proof or evidence, saying that Imran worked for Uber, having Imran work for him, misrepresenting so many things. Are there law firms in DC that just rise to this level of, we're going to understand the law so we know how to break it for you, and just like criminal attorneys?
I would I don't think that the bigger law firms are like that. I don't think they can be like that, but I have no doubt that they're small operators who, they're lawyers.
Isn't Perkins Coie regularly involved in questionable activities that can't possibly be legal?
It would seem that way. And, there are brands of law firms that decide, they're careful firms whose clients are the rich and famous, who are risk averse and who are willing to pay up to have a careful law firm make sure that you stay out of trouble. There are those type of law firms. And there are many good law firms like that. Sidley Austin, I would argue, is one of those firms.
Okay.
There are other firms that make a specialty of taking it as close to the line as possible, taking the most aggressive position possible for a different breed of client that reasons that this breed of client is so rich that they can break the law with impunity, and when they get caught, they can drag the proceedings out for so long that ultimately the cost of breaking the law is so small relative to the gigantic amount of money that they can make in the interim. So there are people who will hide behind the skirts or pants or whatever of these law firms, and there are very aggressive law firms out there who make good money.
Because here's the other interesting thing about Sidley Austin. I know this has nothing to do with practicing law, but it falls on the map in Washington, D.C. in this area that, in my view, is very conspicuously removed from the 3D map of Google Earth, which, you know, maybe that's a coincidence based on where they're located in town here, but we've heard Chris Peranto describe how the incredible detail of Google Earth providing all these, you know, 3D representation of buildings and stuff. It's just strange to me that right here in the middle of Washington, D.C., I mean, there's sensitive sites here and whatever, but this is where, you know, so many of the law firms that we've been talking about happen to fall into this area that's considered too sensitive to have 3D data on the map.
That's near the White House. Well, maybe we should go back into the slides because I'm mindful of the time. That's all right. So, you know, the Browder case, without pulling up any more links here, we'll go into the next page in a second. The Browder case is interesting because here's Vladimir Putin in that setting before the world saying, you know, I'll let Mueller, you know, investigate the people you want to investigate. You come over to Russia, we'll have investigators do that, you have your people in the room, but I want our people to be able to come to America and let you interrogate Browder over the concerns that we have pursuant to this treaty. And that was a very elegant suggestion in my view.
Very strategic as well.
Very strategic, delivered, you know, obviously I don't speak Russian, you may speak Russian and you're not telling me, but
no,
I don't think you do.
I know how to say, like, are you awake?
Right.
And one rude phrase that I won't share.
But just watching Putin speak and interact in that setting, which was not an easy setting to face down the American press, you know, in that great hall and be there with Donald Trump under the, you know, I was very impressed with his demeanor. And, you know, lest we get into this whole issue, Ortel's complimenting Putin, you know, Putin's a thug. I mean, how many people recoil in horror when you bring up the Clinton body count?
Right.
You know, and how factual is that Clinton body count? I mean, it's really unusual to me to see the number of people. You take H.W. Bush. There's no H.W. Bush body count as long as the Clinton body count. I mean, it's very dangerous, it would seem, to be close to the Clintons.
Right.
And, you know, so why is it totally acceptable for everybody in the mainstream media and for senators? I heard that idiot Ben Sass, the never-Trumper, you know, just now before I came over here, talking about everybody knows that Vladimir Putin is a thug and a murderer and a this and a that. Really, Ben? Everybody knows that. Okay?
Well, how is he any different, as you've said, than anyone else who has been the president of a country that's waged war? And I mean, sure, political enemies. I mean, Lyndon Johnson, Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, George H.W. Aren't they all murderous thugs? Well,
or to take, you know, take for example, I was never a fan of the notion, whether in Vietnam or more recently under Barack Obama, that you know, the president of the United States should be sitting there deciding who gets drone striked.
Yeah.
I mean, it does not seem to me to be a good use of the president of the United States' time. I mean, I would have thought...
Not moral at all.
Exactly. I mean, if you're going to fight a war, and this is the whole idea of the Constitution, in theory, should work here. You're going to fight a war. The framers said, listen, you got to come before the American people, and you got to get the House of Representatives, it's closest to the people. You got to get the House of Representatives to declare war, because war is serious.
Somehow that went away.
Yeah, well, back in 1776, that generation, 1789, they were very familiar not only with the war they fought, but you know, the history of England in particular was bloody prior to 1776. For the previous 200 years, there have been many, many wars, and wars that had nearly bankrupted England. You know, the campaign in Ireland, for example, in the late 1500s and early 1600s. So there was, you know, very much in the minds of the founders was this idea that if you're going to fight a war, you have to have national will behind it, and it should make sense.
Right.
So, you know, as you say, we're way off that.
Yeah.
We have this gigantic machinery. We're now going to fund it more and more. And Vladimir Putin sitting there going, you know, you're beginning to scare me a little bit here, you know, and I don't like to be scared. So maybe we should talk about this whole war thing and what could happen between the two. So,
you know, when Putin brought up the whole thing about Browder, I couldn't help when he said specifically that the 400 million, maybe it was sent legally. I couldn't help but think, is Mr. Putin watching Sunday with Charles on the illustrious VK.com Russian social media network? And I found it very strange. Our numbers are way, way down on VK. So this one view, that might be Mr. Putin himself tuning in, because we used to get sometimes 200-300 views on VK.com. So, but joking aside, I did get the sense also that Donald Trump was following the types of things that we're talking about, specifically when he spoke about the Pakistani mystery man's servers. First he said, where is the server? Then he said, where are the servers? I think he was referring to the laptop computer that was found in that phone booth by the U.S. Capitol Police, or whoever found it, with notes to Imran's lawyer, and the server that we seem to have presented evidence of at 4809 Sprayer Street. I think Donald Trump is very aware of all this stuff.
Yeah, I would hazard a guess that both presidents are not necessarily themselves into the details of what we may be doing, but
no 3-hour Sundays with Charles?
I doubt it. I would hope not. If I were married to Melania Trump, the last thing I'd be doing is watching Sunday with Charles for 3 hours to hear about charity fraud. I can think of many other things I'd like to do, particularly with my young son, Barron. So, but I do think the staffs of these people, we know from the numbers, we've got regular views of 10, 12, 20,000, lots and lots of people are watching this. And I would hope are directing it to the attention of various government authorities, including the senior people around Donald Trump and around Vladimir Putin. I have asked the question because I've been on lots of the different print and radio and television media in Russia. Is anyone noticing this? And I have gotten the polite response: "Is you bet your ass they are." So. I think what we're doing here in trying to bridge a gap in understanding between the Russian people and the American people, between the deplorables around the world, to make sense of the mess that the cronies and the globalists have created, is a good thing.
Yeah.
So if we go to the next page, because I am mindful of time here.
Yes.
We've been through a bunch of this stuff before, but what's really going on here is uncovering the real scandals. Forget what Hillary and Brennan and Comey and the Never Trumpers want you to think about. The real scandal here is the operation, the use of taxpayer resources to create mischief and mayhem around the world, and deals and investment opportunities for political donors to both parties. That's the real situation here. American government spending is by far the largest in the world. The opportunity to pay $100,000 to a corrupt politician or his political action committee and get a $10 million, $100 million, billion deal back is there. It's been there for decades.
Yeah.
And this idea that this Bush's Mukasey, and it was striking to me how many H.W. and W. Bush people were joining the rebuke parade against Trump right away. His thesis that Putin never expected Trump to win and was actually doing this, meddling in the election, to send a message to Hillary Clinton that he could always get Hillary Clinton once she became president of the United States, is completely far-fetched. I mean, it's just like,
pure
dude,
stupidity. Like,
how long were you Attorney General of the United States, and could we have that money back, please? I mean, that's just ridiculous. I mean, you have to get, as a business person, I mean, he's not a business person, you look at different scenarios, you say, let's fly spec, let's think about all kinds of ideas, put them up on the board. Now let's go back and say, all right, which is the most probable?
Yeah, feasibility.
Which is the most likely? Let's not. That is down there at like 0.00025%. Very interesting. Glad you went on TV. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Then you get. I don't even want to dignify politifraud, but please don't put this link up. But the very same person, I spoke to this guy. The very same person.
I saw that earlier with Larry Nichols. I had that up.
Yeah,
Politifraud. I said politifake, I called it.
Politifake. Well, the very same dude who contacted me to talk about the Clinton Foundation, to get my views or whatever.
Who knew nothing about fraud.
And then accepted, whether he paid for it himself or not, whether politifraud paid for it. He gets on a flight. He goes over to Africa to take it. Put his eyes on the Clinton Foundation in the various countries in Africa, and he writes this glowing report suggesting that a great reporter, investigative reporter, Richard Pollack, was wrong. Then fails to reveal that politifraud is backed by hard left progressives and has all kinds of bias inherent in politifraud. And the politifraud is run actually out of a journalism school, believe it or not, the Poynter School of Journalism, which in turn is a part of a charity.
Wow.
So I mean, this is predictable. When I saw that dude's name, he's the one who writes a piece here debunking the notion that Browder had anything to do with $400 million. And I just don't think, you say what you want about Vladimir Putin, he's not going to go out, show up in Helsinki and make a completely fanciful claim, when the stakes being as high as they are.
About one guy. Why would he pick out that one guy?
There's a lot to it. There's a lot to it, and I hope this will cause, people in the alternative sphere to really start digging in, as we will,
to Bill Browder.
What really happened with Browder.
And the fact that you've got guys like Politifraud and Bill Browder has an article that he wrote in Time magazine, this is quite clearly damage control. These guys are trying to spin this, so it's like just bringing more attention to it.
Right,
it's really outrageous.
So the real questions, and for some of our new viewers who may not know these, we'll go rip through them, so we don't want to bore our longtime viewers. But who in the hell vetted the Clinton Foundation back in 2008 when it was an absolute bankrupt fraud, right? Who did that? Who basically said, yeah, it's fine, this memorandum of understanding? Who in the hell wrote that? What work was actually done to check any of these statements? There's not a single statement in here that's accurate, right?
Yeah.
And so who did this work? Probably Perkins Coie, for all we know. But I mean, it's ridiculous that this document was drafted. It's ridiculous that this document was even used. It's ridiculous that people would sign their name. Bruce Lindsay signs his name. Valerie Jarrett signs her name. How could Valerie Jarrett, by the 16th of November, 2008, know that any of these statements are actually right?
Now, this is the one that has the original date, right?
Right, that's why I put it on, because it's the correct one. How in the hell did she know this on the 16th? Her birthday, her 50th birthday, I think, was the 13th of November. She was just appointed, I may have that date wrong, on the 14th, but she was just made co-chair of the Obama-Biden transition team several days before this was signed. This is a weekend, right? They just won this historic election. The FBI is closing in on her and on Barack Obama, asking questions about, did you sell the Senate seat, and if so, to whom?
Yeah.
How the hell did they get this thing drafted? Who authorized the private server, the private devices? Where are the records on all that? Donald Trump must...
When you say who authorized it, why do we presume anyone authorized it? How do we know she didn't just do it and say, hey,
Well, I'm told, call me foolish, but I'm told the way the government in theory works is that we have procedures. That, politicians come and go, and there are rules and regulations and lawyers, lots of lawyers around, and you can't just walk in because you won an election and say, all right, the first thing I want to do is burn the Constitution. The next thing I want to do is steal all the jets.
But they also aren't going to announce it, right? I feel like it seems that she would just have this server set up and start sending emails.
No, because again, there are rules. These are classified materials, and so there are strict rules about the handling.
They don't care about that.
Well, that's my point. So how did the apparatus that was in theory controlled by the Bushes through the 20th of January 2009, and that entered into this transition plan and handed things over? You couldn't fire all the non-political people in the various places that oversee this. How did they actually get all this stuff done as a practical standpoint? How did long-time dedicated, there got to be some of them in the State Department, who started getting emails from HDR 22 at Clinton,
not saying,
oh, wait a minute, you can't do that.
Here?
My friend over here is in prison because he sent one, you would have thought there's a lot, and there's a rich vein that should be mined there. And so how many other, I got to believe that Barack Obama had his own private server, that he had his own, maybe multiple servers, multiple devices, used multiple aliases. Okay, why aren't we all over that? Is that what Brennan and Comey and others want to cover up, Yates? The fact that Barack Obama was intimately involved, breaking 18 U.S.C. 793 E and F, which is the mishandling of classified information. Is that what they're desperately afraid, will now come out? Because when you get these documents that Rod Rosenstein is making sure you don't see, you'll see Barack Obama, hey, Hillary.
I think you're onto something there, Charles. I think that is the case, and I think that there are an array of forces aligned to protect that fact that would boggle the mind if and when we find out the full extent.
Well, that's got to end. I mean, I hope that ended yesterday. Now, why did Hillary get away? Now, Bush, in the end, had no Inspector General for the State Department, and that condition persisted through the entire period of Hillary's tenure as Secretary of State until September of 2013. Why was there no Inspector General at the now there's a fraud alert, I guess. But why was there no, this guy Linick is here, Stephen Linick is the current guy. He comes on board. You don't want to hit the more button because you'll get a video, but he comes on board in September, I believe, of 2013. But for all of 2009, 10, and 11, and 12, and until September or thereabouts of 2013, there's nobody sitting on top of the State Department as billions go missing. And Barack Obama seriously gets up and tells the nation that Hillary Clinton is the most qualified presidential candidate in the history of the Republic and one of the best secretaries of state ever.
That's absurd.
I mean, it's like
pure stupidity.
I thought you're not allowed to smoke dope in the White House. I mean, that's just ridiculous.
I think that Willie Nelson did on the roof at one time.
Yeah, I know, but I mean, so if we just quickly go back into the slides here, if we may. Without hitting, please don't hit this link, but the Intelligence Community Inspector General did issue a report on July 6, 2015. We need to see that report, Mr. President. Okay, we really need to see that report. And you need to, your people, I hope, have already seen this report. This is the report, most likely, that will have identified, it says now Thomas Paine is saying at True Pundit, that the country that had all these emails was China. Now, I suspect it's also the UK, also Canada, maybe Israel, possibly Russia. Who knows what other non-state actors may have gotten these emails off the server as well.
Did you ever have a chance to hear this Fox interview with Guccifer 1 from jail?
I did hear that a while back.
Where he said that the server had been scanned many times, and it's not a matter of, if it was scanned, but how many people had access into it. And he also said something that, I mean, again, people keep trying to ask Donald Trump these loaded questions like, why do you trust Vladimir Putin more than the intelligence community? It's like, why would you rather be, stabbed in the brain versus shot in the heart? Neither of them should be trusted. We just need to look at the facts. And this Guccifer 1.0 made a very salient point in saying that Russian cyber operations are sufficiently sophisticated they would not leave Russian footprints so obviously as are present in this case as to be immediately identified. It just smacks of an obvious misdirection play to make you think that Russia did it when clearly someone else did.
And wasn't that one of the set of files that Snowden or WikiLeaks was last year?
Well, WikiLeaks released the Vault 7 files, and that specifically spoke about, I think it was Umbrage, which was a project that allowed them to, mask their activity, make it appear as if it originated from a server here or there. And of course, we've been having several conversations with John Mark Dugan, who spoke about he is an individual operator of, certainly more sophisticated with computer hacking and security and stuff than me, but it doesn't strike me as the most sophisticated guy in the world. And he, operating alone, was able to thwart investigations into the location of his servers by having aliases and redirecting where things were. When somebody I think the FBI got a search warrant for his server, then he just redirected, it was coming from Singapore or wherever. So he was able to do that quite easily. I don't know that we have good evidence that Russia did anything.
Yeah. So we got to see that report when it comes out. We don't put this link up because we've had it up so many times, but if you haven't been to this Hillary R. Clinton vault file, particularly the first part, the second part, and the 23rd part, and the 6th part, are all worth reading. There's an enormous amount of information in the public domain that shows that Hillary Clinton was stone cold busted for mishandling classified information. And think of the number of people who say, we'll let her off, she's going to be president. Better to have her tainted, and president, so then we have her, than to expose this, because we don't want Donald Trump to win. I think it's the genius level logic of these people who were involved in this. Then we have this link, the Zero Hedge link, is sort of funny. It's a screed against George Soros, basically saying he's going to die now, knowing that Sorosism, or Satanism, or whatever you want to call it, is now close to dead. And I think, this person, he's a philanthropist in theory, but this person has certainly done a lot more harm than good, yet he has managed to escape. And I think it's time to bring this man to justice, particularly, simply for charity fraud. I mean, we could go beyond that to other areas, but I think charity fraud, this man's foundation certainly contributed $1 million in 2004 to the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative, representing that it was a charity when it wasn't, and that entity was not registered in New York, the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative thing. If we're going to go after Paul Manafort for a 2004-2005 tax case, we're going to raid his home with his wife, we're going to throw him in solitary confinement right before Father's Day, then I would suggest to you that this gentleman should not be making long-term plans.
You should put him under the jail. Don't buy green bananas, George Soros.
So if we go back into the slides, foot folder.
He'll never live that down.
This one is from our friend Thomas Paine. We hit that True Pundit one. It's a very good one.
Oh yes, I just saw this as you were arriving.
Yeah, and this, apparently, Lisa Page may have confirmed that Peter Strzok, first of all, Peter Strzok was lying to Congress.
Yeah.
There's a shock. But that Peter Strzok may not have told his compatriots about Hillary Clinton's emails being routed to at least one other foreign actor, that being China. And all but 4 of the 30,000 odd emails went directly to China, do not pass go.
Wow.
And think of the leverage. We ask ourselves, there's a persistent trade deficit with China. We can't ever seem to make progress with China. Might it be because China has all kinds of damaging information on people who regulate the trade deficit, on the Obama administration, maybe some in the Trump administration? Could it possibly be the case that there are a lot of people enthralled to China in Washington, D.C., one way or another, directly or indirectly through their families? Could that possibly be? What do you think? I think it's absolutely the case.
I think it might well be. I'm curious to get your opinion, Charles. Do you think, there's been a lot of speculation the past few days that Peter Strzok may have had some sort of clandestine role where he's actually a CIA operative of some kind inserted into the FBI to oversee things like this, and that people within the FBI might not even know about it. I was talking with Robin Gritz earlier today about that possibility, and she's looking into it. There's some policies and some documents that she shared with me that were pretty dense, but there were things in there and things that are coming to light just today and yesterday that Robin said she's never seen this type of thing before.
Well, I think basically what happened, you can go back as far as September 11th, 2001, that we have been operating the United States of America. If there's a spectrum of lawful and lawless, we're a lot closer to the lawless end of the spectrum than we are to the lawful.
Yes.
And, common sense dictates that, and I think the benefit of the bargain of creating the CIA initially was the CIA was supposed to be outward.
Not dealing with
what is this?
the United States.
Dipped?
This is from our friend Shepard Ambellis at IntelliHub. Sheep dipping is a term in the intelligence community for taking a wolf, like a CIA asset or a military asset, and dipping him in sheep's clothing slowly over time, giving him a plausible alternative background, as in the case of Lee Harvey Oswald. No, he's not a CIA operative doing something clandestine. He's a communist out on the street handing out flyers. So Peter Strzok, sheep dipping of Peter Strzok would be to insert him into the FBI and give him a role in counterterrorism on the FBI, when he's actually doing something. This presents documents that show he was a station chief, a counter-espionage station chief,
section chief.
Sorry, section chief, which apparently is a CIA designation, not an FBI designation.
This is 10 days after the guy walks in to the Washington, sends a letter to James Comey.
That's why I wanted to show it to you,
Yeah.
Charles.
Yeah.
Because this is, you know, you might not necessarily read IntelliHub, and Shepard Umbellis might not necessarily be emailing with you, but I wanted you to take a look at this information because I personally feel quite convinced that Peter Strzok has some sort of clandestine role that gives him the confidence to lie to Congress with impunity, no concern for what may happen to him, text people about taking out the President of the United States. I mean, this is the same mentality that whoever it is may have been operating on November 22nd, 1963 would have to have.
Yeah, you don't get to do that, you know, and the fact that people would try to defend this behavior makes me suggest anybody who would want to defend Peter Strzok at this time
Gotta be in on it.
Goes to the high on the list of, you know,
suspects,
of people to be investigated.
Yes.
And now we learned, again, let's not hit this link because I'm mindful of the time, but in this Hill story we learned that apparently Mueller even now is seeking to go after 5 more people.
In the indictment.
Well, yeah, to squeeze 5 more people.
You know, what's also interesting is that online sleuths have tracked down some of the 12, and it appears that most of them are within the United States. So
really,
might not even need Russia's help. And people who were balking at Putin's, you know, kept coming back to the "do you trust Putin?" Forget it. Forget about trusting Putin. How about conducting investigation where you actually question the suspects and look at evidence versus destroying it, ignoring it, coming up with your own ideas and stories? It's just absurd.
Right. So that's very interesting. So Donald Trump, as we know, he's tried to walk back his comments.
Hated that.
I didn't like that either. This Hill story, though, let's hit that one. This is interesting. Already, here we have 5,600 almost shares, but already this morning, the Russian Defense Ministry is trying to follow up on the suggestions from the summit and say, how can we work together on security projects? And of course, General Jack Keane on Fox today said, oh, you can't trust the Russians. And guys, you know, we're never going to get anywhere with this if it's you know, we need to be in a perpetual state of war with Russia.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not an option. Okay, we've got to find a way to get off this perpetual state of war thing.
Well, it's obviously what those guys want, though, because then it's a perpetual state of selling bombs and airplanes and helicopters and gasoline to people.
Right, exactly.
So that's
you know, what might the Russian side have to say about the American side? I mean, have we ever made any mistakes internationally?
Or done anything to cause them to not trust us?
Yeah, I mean, I doubt it. I mean, we wouldn't do that. Of course we have.
Another good thing that Putin brought up that speaks directly to some of the things that we've talked about is this Novichok attack in the United Kingdom against, what's his name? Skripal. I always confuse that with the technology place, Skolkovo. But he said, hey, we'd love to see any of the evidence that they have, and they haven't presented it. So Russia's just getting accused all over the place by MI6, by CIA. I think Donald Trump is right to not trust them, and I was really, really annoyed that he took the teeth out of that stance. Like, why is he doing that? You know, at first he said he's not going to go to war in Syria, and then this fake chemical attack got him to launch missiles. I want him to, I don't understand that pattern.
Yeah. It wasn't, I mean, I thought that the summit as it was done was fine. It was great, and I agree with you. I wish he had not done what he just did, but he's the president. Right. So let's not hit this story, but this is a story that said this morning that Rod Rosenstein had been summoned to the White House earlier this morning. I don't know if that's regular stuff or whether it was serious stuff, but if so, it's interesting. This is, on the other hand, worth hitting. So there's a great guy, we'll give him a shout out, Kevin O'Rourke in Roanoke, Virginia. Is a fantastic person. He's a highly skilled accountant and investor. And he's on top of this, he's on Fraud Watch for us, and he keeps sending to me by email. And thank you for doing that, Kevin. these various and sundry stories about how the Department of Justice around the country is now energized under Sessions and under Trump, and there's literally each day we're seeing more and more people tagged for prison. This is 6 years in prison for a relatively trivial crime, which includes illegally sending around HIV/AIDS drugs. Does that sound familiar? HIV/AIDS drugs being distributed illegally. Drug trafficking here.
You know these dudes are spending Sunday with Charles.
Perhaps, let's hope. But so this dates back to a case May 14th, 2009, in the sweet spot of the Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS fraud.
Wow.
So, I mean, this is an encouraging sign to me that some people are taking this very seriously.
Yeah.
Now, don't hit the link, please, but Theresa May is now saying, that Trump, thanking Trump for what he did with NATO. I mean, Theresa May is hanging on by the skin of her teeth. She may not survive as prime minister, in my mind. And then we have the Rasmussen poll. This is pretty funny. You can hit that one.
Didn't Theresa May turn around and then say something crappy about Trump on a talk show that day he left? Yeah,
but she's now. This is not good news for anybody in the Democratic Party, right? 73% of the Democrats want a fresh face as 2020 nominee, and I think we can agree, without being catty, that Hillary Clinton and Elizabeth Warren and Joe Biden and Bernie Sanders, both genders considered there, are not fresh faces. Okay, they're not close to fresh faces. Now, on the other hand, you have this picture of whatever her name is on the right there. Make it smaller, please. That lady who suggests that we abolish ICE. And this person, had the nerve of giving an interview where she completely botched her analysis of the Middle East. And then in trying to, she came across, I don't know if you were saying it, but somebody was saying it's like that Miss America contestant, who just bubblehead blonde who just asked a question and just zoned out and made no sense. More or less that's what happened here. And at the end of it, to try to blunt the criticism, she said, look, I'm really not a global expert. And then they go back and they look at her degree at George Washington, and it's, did
That's
you
a
have
fresh
to,
face
did
for
you
you,
have
Charles.
to do that?
That's a fresh face.
Oh my God. Spend some of those millions on something, and Jesus.
Paper bag, burlap sack.
Oh my God.
Sorry, so they went back and about her global expertise?
It turns out that she, in fact, got a degree in international politics and economics from George Washington.
God.
So, I mean,
oh my God.
So I think the Democratic Party is in a place now where, frankly, the Republican Party's got issues, but people in America are becoming ever more independent in the way we think. And to push the Democratic Party to the far left, to a place where even Jay Johnson, the former head of the Homeland Security under Obama, is saying, you can't abolish ICE.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we going to be doing next to the Democratic Party? Saying, we're going to change the way the Earth goes around the sun so that America will always be in daylight. I mean, this is a ridiculous idea.
Well, it's literally like saying abolish the police. It's like, wait a minute. Maybe there's some problems with some of the procedure and some of the things that they're doing. Maybe it needs reform, but abolish it? Like what? Whenever you ask anybody like this, what's the plan? Like abolish ICE, what happens minute one after? They're like, don't ask me any questions.
Speak to my publicist.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm not an expert.
Exactly.
Okay, so go
You're unlikely to be a congressperson as well. But then, I don't know if we haven't talked about this. This zero hedge thing is really worth, I had sort of glossed over this, but Anthony Bourdain, the fellow who died under mysterious circumstances, apparently, I'm not going to use the words, but he described Bill Clinton as an entitled, rapey, gropey, grabby, disgusting individual about a month before he was found dead. Yeah. And this thing has 7.6 thousand shares in less than 24 hours.
Ooh, people are very interested in Anthony Bourdain's death because it just made no sense. They keep referring to it as a suicide, but I just don't really think that someone who is a recovering heroin addict would opt to kill themselves in such a error-prone and injury-prone and dangerous way as hanging himself with a bathrobe belt. Why not just inject himself with heroin?
And this is 4 months before, so this is February, let's call it 2018.
Plus, his girlfriend gave that speech at the Cannes Film Festival calling out Harvey Weinstein, and she made a specific point of saying that there were other people just like him there, and that we know who you are. So she's making open threats to them, and then he's killed. I received a phone call from a crowdsourcer who remains anonymous who said she's friends with Asia Argento, and Asia received a text from Bourdain's phone with a picture of Bourdain hanging dead, which we could easily conceive of someone, if Anthony Bourdain had an iPhone or a Samsung phone that uses the thumbprint, you could get somebody's thumbprint after they're dead, take a picture with their phone, go through their contacts, send a text. This person also told me that Asia Argento and who's the woman that got arrested for cocaine, Rose McGowan, were unfriended on Instagram from Bourdain's account from that phone. So that sounds like somebody sending a message to them. If that's true, we can't verify that.
Right.
I haven't seen the texts.
But yeah, and I think that's something worth investigating. I mean, again, we have a Federal Bureau of Investigation that
Federal Bureau of Obstructing Investigation.
That could perhaps do some of that work. And but the 50,000 feet above the Earth point is, here you have the Clintons, you have the world's diarrhea expert, and children's book author. You have the proudest feminist in the world, and you have Juanita Broderick's rapist.
Yes.
And they're all one big happy fraudster family.
It's crazy.
And people are still giving this fraudster family money. And how can you, on the one hand, explain the rush to judgment, which I think in many cases is proper in the Me Too movement? You are innocent until proven guilty, and all the people who are accused deserve to have trials, fair trials. But I think it is high time for people in the Me Too movement to stand up. How come the Me Too movement isn't training its considerable arsenal on the Clintons?
Exactly.
Why is Bill Clinton allowed to make ridiculous comments?
Well, because apparently the scope of what you can do to people against their will has changed.
Yeah, I know.
He's right on top. He's got his finger on the pulse of what you can do to people against their will.
Right. It's absurd.
It is.
And now we learn, that Kevin actually has sent me information, but if you hit this Orange County Register, this is a letter flagging Hillary Clinton and her people for, they're fundraising with this Onward Together thing, and I think we should probably mock up a few alternative slogans for her PAC. My suggestion off the top of my head would be to, take whatever, I don't know if that's got this, yeah.
It doesn't like ad blocker. It wants, I'll take care of it. Don't worry.
All right, so anyway, this is a story that basically calls out Hillary Clinton for her fundraising for Onward Together, which is one of her latest PACs. And the question is, how much money might she be taking from the Russians and from other thugs around the world?
Well, what allows them to accuse anyone of being a thug if you're going to bite someone?
Again, that's their modus operandi. We're going to accuse you. We'll be the first to accuse you of what we're doing. So that way, when you find out what we're doing, we can say, that's old news, and besides, you're just doing it's a political stunt.
Right.
And that's their playbook. They're grouper acolytes. I mean, they really sign on to the fact that Americans are stupid, and these people are geniuses, and they can get away with, saying the most outlandish things, and Americans will sit back and say, well, Hillary Clinton, she's the smartest woman in the world. She must be right, and I must be wrong. I mean,
she is so far from the smartest woman in the world. It's
so
like,
what I'd like to do is just close the presentation with text on the slide there below this, if I may.
Sorry, someone has been persistently trying to disrupt the broadcast through a method that I won't describe, but they have failed. What did you want to see here, Charles?
Just we go back to the slide.
Yes.
This is lifted from the Department of Justice site on the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Okay, we've talked about this in the past. Okay, this is an act set up during World War II, targeting, actually, the concern then was Germans, that the German government would have people inside the United States,
like the Bush family,
working on their behalf.
Yeah.
And so this was something that was actually put into law in 1938. It's been on the books ever since. And if you notice, you're acting as an agent of foreign principles. It doesn't mean foreign governments alone. It means either foreign governments, foreign political parties, foreign corporations. You have to register, okay? And you have to file, I've looked at this carefully, you have to file reports that are very detailed. It's not like the Clinton Foundation reports. It's far more detailed about who is paying you, what's the composition of the firm, what are your specific duties, who is getting paid, how many people work in your firm. You got to file these reports quarterly. They have to be truthful. And if the government wants to make an issue of it, you're in big trouble. So when we think about this whole mess here that is the Clinton Foundation, you know, and are the Clinton campaigns, they've created, in my view, a long-standing pattern and practice of asserting the need for money for causes that sound interesting, and then mixing them all together, whether it's the charity, the political campaign, for a candidate or for a party, and they just are trying to encourage the inward flow of money towards themselves,
whatever.
And then they divert it however they want it. And this has been allowed to happen with regard to the Clintons, certainly from October 23rd, 1997, when the Clinton Foundation was formed, all the way forward. And Republicans who knew about this and let it happen under George W. Bush need to be punished. Democrats who knew about it under Barack Obama need to be punished. If Barack Obama and Valerie Jarrett think they can emulate the Clinton Foundation practice, which I believe they do think, they need to be punished. Their tickets need to be punched. This Obama Foundation, I got a call today from somebody in Chicago explaining, livid, that that Barack Obama's foundation seriously is going around Chicago saying, well, we're just going to be a place for people to meet. We're not going to hold any records.
What?
Well, you can't do that.
That library in the neighborhood I went to?
Yeah, exactly. The Sphinx or whatever it is, the pyramids there.
For $500 million?
Yeah.
Why doesn't he just open a Starbucks?
I know, or work in one. But it's just ridiculous stuff. So, if we're going to have a system of laws, which I think Donald Trump would very much like to see a system of laws back in place here.
Right.
Let's have, Car 54, Where Are You? That television show from the 60s. Where in the hell is Waldo Sessions? I mean, what the hell is this guy doing? Why is he tolerating Rod Rosenstein's behavior?
Larry Nichols says he's working behind the scenes. I mean, again, I'm
way behind the scenes.
I'm hopeful that it just takes longer to drain a swamp than any of us realized. And I knew it wasn't going to happen the first week, but I think yesterday we turned a corner. I think Putin tipped his hat to Donald Trump, saying he gave him the ball and said, the ball is in your court. He's ready to play ball. And I think Trump came to the arena ready as well.
And that's what scares the gladiators, the retired gladiators.
That's why all these Brennan, Clapper, Comey, all these, Chris Cuomo, name them, Wolf Blitzer, all these morons are coming out of the woodwork to just flatly criticize what might be the greatest diplomatic effort made by a president since when?
Since Reagan.
Right, Gorbachev in Helsinki.
Yeah. But so I think, this is a moment for the crowdsourced community to understand that Donald Trump and the people who are trying to disrupt the deep state need your help. And you can be very helpful circulating these materials to people who have not yet seen it, encouraging people to go on Crowdsource the Truth, to support Crowdsource the Truth, to refer it around the world, to contact your congressperson, contact your senator, contact investigative reporters, send messages of support into people, raise your voice, get out and vote, plan to vote in November of 2018, vote out the deep state supporting cronies in both parties. So that's a bipartisan message. Thank you very much. Vote them both out. If you've got Republicans in there who are fine with deep state bullshit, you're out of here. Democrats, it almost goes without saying, most of them are all in for that. So get rid of them too. And the only way we can help Donald Trump, and for that matter Vladimir Putin and other people who want to make their respective countries great again, is by proving to the politicians that we're not going to be silent. By standing up and tweeting, writing, talking, get active. Yeah. It's easy now to get active. It used to be impossible. I remember thinking when I started on GE in 2007, how the hell am I going to influence anybody? I'm just one dude. Well, the fact is, if you study things carefully, as I have, as you do, this is a message to people who are on the fence thinking about doing something, find a topic that concerns you, that you think should be fixed, find a solution, advocate for that solution, get out there and push.
Yeah.
And enough of this business as usual, crony, swamp monster politics. Enough of that. Nobody should want that.
Yeah, and I appreciate you mentioning that, Charles. You know, definitely Crowdsource the Truth needs people's support, and we've recently started, as a thank you to the people who are regular sponsors on Patreon, I've been offering a special show on Saturdays with Quinn Michaels that's available only to people who support Crowdsource the Truth on Patreon. So for even as little as $1 per month, you're going to get access not only to all of the regular videos that we're offering for free on YouTube, but also to special broadcasts like this one that Quinn and I did just the other day, which was a really interesting walking tour. We've been utilizing a new piece of technology that I put together that allows for mobile Skype broadcasting, which is really exciting because for people like Quinn and friends of ours around the country and around the world, I can now virtually take them to places that might be very difficult for them to get to otherwise. And on this trip, Quinn and I knew about it always, but I never put it together. Quinn, I revealed to him this very strange black cube in the middle of Astor Place right there. Yeah, so Quinn is telling me that that holds some symbolic significance in the world of occultism and all kinds of things like that. So definitely want to thank the people that are regular sponsors on Crowdsource the Truth, and for people who find $1 per month to be a financial burden, I certainly apologize to them. There's tons of free content available 6 other days during the week, and Quinn and I even did a free broadcast before that that was a precursor to it. And no one needs to provide any financial support. If they're uncomfortable with that, they can share the videos, they can share the links, and we see that black cube coming up right there, so people get a little taste for what they would see in that special Saturday broadcast with my friend Quinn. And Charles, I can't thank you enough for taking time out of your busy schedule to come here for a special Tuesday edition of Closing In, and I apologize that we've been a little erratic with the schedule. I'm trying to keep our Closing In schedule regular. But was there anything else you wanted to share with everybody before we close it out for today?
No, thank you very much. Thanks to you crowdsourcers. Keep up the fight. And you know, I think we're making good progress here. And again, I would not be making plans much beyond November 15th, 2018 if I were a trustee, director, executive, donor, professional advisor to any of these Clinton Foundation frauds. I would not be making long-term plans.
Remind us why November 15th is a significant
That's
date?
a very big tax filing, the final tax filing deadline for the chief calendar filing, calendar year-end filing Clinton charities. You can't file past that date. And I think the authorities in the IRS, the Justice Department, the Postal Service, governments around the world, this time I think they're pretty well educated about the true state of the Clinton Foundation. They have the ability to cross-check what the Clinton Foundation lies about in their forms with what other donors say they've done. And there's so many, the evidence in the public domain of fraud involving the Clinton Foundation is overwhelming.
Exactly, and hopefully those guys have been watching Crowdsource the Truth. I almost forgot, I do want to thank people that are watching our live streams on the 21st Century 3D YouTube channel, where I've been experimenting with Super Chat, and we did just receive a Super Chat. I saw it go by on the comments. I apologize to the person that put that in, that I can't see it. Let me see if I can get there and give them a personal thank you. That always helps. Oh, it's Rico Coin Report for €2. Thank you very much, Rico Coin Report. And we also had earlier Ainsk from $20 for Super Chat. So, you know, these financial sponsorship payments are important not only in keeping Crowdsource the Truth financially healthy, allowing me to continue to pay for electricity and things like that that we need to put the broadcasts out, but it's an important part in changing the way that people at large can receive their news by distributing the sponsorship in small increments €2, $5, $20. No one person has an overwhelming financial burden, and no one person has the financial leverage over Crowdsource the Truth to dictate what we talk about or not. So it really is a new way of doing it, and I'm pleased that we're able to do that, and I thank everybody who's been a sponsor. I want to thank everyone for watching. I will be back tomorrow. Thank you, Charles. See you Sunday for another, we've got to come up with another movie theme, and we'll think about it overnight. Thanks for watching, everybody.